Good to see you. Well, kind of see you. Uh, it's a little later in the day than I usually do these, but this morning I was up and I was working on a couple of different projects, including my Lego project. I got a little bit of a start on it and stuff like that. So I had some other things to do this morning, but I didn't forget about you. So we're going to do some other things, but we need to get back to Mr. Popper's Penguins. So we're going to get to chapter 5. Now remember, now they have a penguin. Mrs. Popper is a little worried about the food situation and if they'll have enough money to buy the food for the penguin. Mr. Popper is thrilled to have a little penguin of his own. Bill and Janie obviously think this is going to be a great thing. And Mrs. Popper also is thinking this is going to be kind of a nice thing because she's hoping maybe the penguin will teach Mr. Popper some manners. So we'll see how that goes. Now, they need to get some food for the penguin. Also, they need to, they want to bore holes in their icebox or refrigerator so that the penguin can sleep in there and be comfortable. Because coming from Antarctica, even our temperatures here in South Dakota aren't nearly cold enough, consistently enough. So let's see what happens. Chapter 5, Trouble with a Penguin. The next day was quite eventful at 432 Proudfoot Avenue. First, there was a serviceman, and then the policeman, and then the trouble about the license. Captain Cook was in the children's room watching Janie and Bill together put together a jigsaw puzzle on the floor. Jigsaw puzzle, nice. He was very good about not disturbing the pieces after Bill had spanked him for eating one. Hey, they're going to have a missing puzzle piece too, like we do. Maybe a penguin ate yours too. Who knows? I don't know. He did not hear the refrigerator serviceman come to the back door. Mrs. Popper had gone marketing for canned shrimps for the penguin, so that Mr. Popper was alone in the kitchen to explain to the serviceman what he wanted done to the refrigerator. The serviceman put his tool bag down on the kitchen floor, looked at the refrigerator, and then at Mr. Popper, who, to tell the truth, had not yet shaved yet and was not very tidy. "Mister," he said, "you don't need no ventilating holes in that there door." "It's my icebox, and I want some holes bored in the door," said Mr. Popper. They argued about it for quite a while. Mr. Popper knew that to get the serviceman to do what he wanted, all he had to do was to explain that he was going to keep a live penguin in the icebox, and that he wanted his pet to have plenty of fresh air, even though the door was closed all night. He felt a little stubborn about explaining, however. He didn't want to discuss Captain Cook with this unsympathetic serviceman, who was already staring at Mr. Popper as if he thought Mr. Popper was not quite right in his head. "Come on, do what I said," said Mr. Popper. "I'm paying you for it." "With what?" asked the serviceman. Mr. Popper gave him a $5 bill. It made him a little sad to think how many beans it would have bought for Mrs. Popper and the children. The serviceman examined the bill carefully, as if he didn't trust Mr. Popper too much. But at last he put it in his pocket, took a drill from his tool bag, and made 5 small holes in a neat pattern on the refrigerator door. Now let's stop there for a second. $5, is that very much? Not really. Not today. If somebody was coming to my house and work on my refrigerator or my microwave or my stove or whatever, if I gave them $5, they'd be like, "Yeah, okay, could you make that $500, sir?" But remember, this is taking place in 1938. $5 would have been worth a little bit more then, so obviously it convinced him to do the job. So, made the 5 holes in the door. The serviceman examined the bill carefully. Oh, we already read that. Let's see. He made 5 small holes in a neat pattern on the refrigerator door. "Now," said Mr. Popper, "don't get up. Wait a minute. There is one more thing." "Now what?" said the serviceman. "I suppose now you want me to take the door off its hinges to let in a little more air. Or do you want me to make a radio set out of your icebox?" "Don't get funny," said Mr. Popper indignantly. "That is no way to talk. Believe it or not, I know what I'm doing. I mean, having you do. I want you to fix an extra handle on the inside of the box so it can be opened from the inside of the box." "That," said the serviceman, "is a fine idea. You want an extra handle on the inside? Sure. He picked up his tool bag. "Aren't you going to do it for me?" asked Mr. Popper. "Oh, sure, said the serviceman, edging toward the back door. Mr. Popper saw that, for all his words of agreement, the serviceman had no intention of putting on an inside handle. "I thought you were a serviceman," he said. I am. That's the first sensible thing you've said yet. You're a fine kind of serviceman if you don't even know how to put an extra handle on the inside of an icebox door. Oh, I don't I? Don't think I don't know how. As far as that goes, I've even got a spare handle in my tool bag, and plenty of screws. You needn't think I don't know how to do it, if I wanted to. Mr. Popper silently reached into his pocket and gave the serviceman his last $5 bill. He was pretty sure that Mrs. Popper would be annoyed at him for spending all that money, but it could not be helped. Mister, said the serviceman, you win. I'll fix your extra handle. And while I'm doing it, you sit down on that chair over there facing me, where I can keep an eye on you. Fair enough, said Mr. Popper, sitting down. The serviceman was still on the floor, putting in the final screws that held the new handle in place, when the penguin came out to the kitchen on his silent pink feet. Surprised at seeing a strange man sitting on the floor, Captain Cook quietly walked over and began to peck him curiously. Remember, Captain Cook is what they decided to name the penguin, so that's the penguin when they talk about Captain Cook. Captain Cook quietly walked over and began to peck him curiously, but the serviceman was even more surprised than Captain Cook. Ork, said the penguin, or perhaps it was the serviceman. Mr. Popper was not quite sure what had happened when he picked himself up and his chair a moment later. There had been a shower of flying tools, a violent slamming of the door, and the serviceman was gone. These sudden noises, of course, brought the children running. Mr. Popper showed them how the refrigerator was now all remodeled for the penguin. He showed Captain Cook, too, by shutting him inside it. The penguin at once noticed a shiny new handle inside and bit it with his usual curiosity. The door opened, and Captain Cook jumped out. Mr. Popper promptly put Captain Cook back inside and shut the door again, to be sure that the penguin learned his lesson. Before long, Captain Cook was quite skillful at getting out and was ready to be taught how to get inside when the door was shut. By the time the policeman came to the back door, Captain Cook was going in and out the refrigerator as easily as if he lived in one all his life. Chapter 6. More Troubles. The children were the first to notice a policeman. Look, Papa, said Bill, there's a policeman at the back door. Is he going to arrest you? Look, said Captain Cook, walking with dignity to the door and trying to poke his beak through the screen. Is this 432 Proudfoot Avenue? It is, answered Mr. Popper. Well, I guess this is the place all right, said the policeman, and he pointed to Captain Cook. Is that thing yours? Yes, it is, said Mr. Popper proudly. And what do you do for a living? Asked the policeman sternly. Papa is an artist, said Janie. He always gets paint and calcimine all over his clothes, said Bill. I am a house painter, a decorator, said Mr. Popper. Won't you come in? I won't, said the policeman, unless I have to. Ha ha, said Bill. The policeman is afraid of Captain Cook. No, said the penguin, opening his red beak wide as if he wanted to laugh at the policeman. Can it talk? Asked the policeman. What is it? A giant parrot? It's a penguin, said Janie. We keep it for a pet. Well, if it's only a bird, said the policeman, lifting his cap to scratch his head in a puzzled sort of way. From the way the fellow with the tool bag yelled at me outside, I thought there was a lion loose in here. Mama says Papa's hair looks like a lion sometimes, said Bill. Keep still, Bill, said Janie. The policeman doesn't care how Papa's hair looks. The policeman now scratched his chin. Well, if it's only a bird, I suppose it'll be okay, if you keep him in a cage. We keep him in the icebox, said Bill. You can put it in the icebox for all I care, said the policeman. What kind of a bird did you say it was? A penguin, said Mr. Popper. And by the way, I might want to take him walking with me. Would it be all right if I kept him on a leash? Well, I tell you, said the policeman. Honestly, I don't know what the municipal ordinance about penguins is, with or without a leash on public streets. I'll ask my sergeant. Maybe I ought to get a license for him, suggested Mr. Popper. It's certainly big enough for a license, said the policeman. I tell you what you do. You call up the city hall and ask them what the ruling about penguins is. And good luck to you, Popper. He's kind of a cute little fella at that. Looks almost human. Good day to you, Popper. And good day to you, Mr. Penguin. Now, the license they're talking about is not like a driver's license. It's pets have to have them. So like here in Millette, my two dogs, Champ and Chester, they have to have a license here in town saying they have their shots, like for rabies and different things like that. And also just to let the town know that we own them. Okay? So most towns and cities, you have to have a license for your pets. And so that's the license he's talking about. Since the penguin's going to be a pet, does he have to have a license like you would for your dogs or other pets? When Mr. Popper telephoned the city hall to see about a license for Captain Cook, the penguin did his best to disconnect the telephone by biting the green cord. Perhaps he thought it was some kind of new eel. But just then, Mrs. Popper came back from market and opened a can of shrimps so that Mr. Popper was soon left alone at the telephone. Even so, he found it was not so easy to learn whether or not he must get a license for his strange pet. Every time he would explain what he wanted, he would be told to wait a minute, and much later a new voice would ask him what he wanted. This went on for considerable time. At last, a new voice seemed to take a little interest in the case. Pleased with this friendly voice, Mr. Popper began again to tell about Captain Cook. Is he an army captain, a police captain, or a navy captain? He is not, said Mr. Popper. He's a penguin. Will you repeat that, please? Said the voice. Mr. Popper repeated it. The voice suggested that perhaps he had better spell it. Penguin, said Mr. Popper. Penguin. Oh, said the voice. You mean that Captain Cook's first name is Benjamin? Not Benjamin, Penguin. It's a bird, said Mr. Popper. Do you mean, said the phone in his ear, that Captain Cook wishes a license to shoot birds? I am sorry, the bird hunting season does not open until November. And please try to speak a little more distinctly, Mr. Topper, did you say your name is? My name is Popper, not Topper, shouted Mr. Popper. Yes, Mr. Potter, now I can hear you quite clearly. Then listen, roared Mr. Popper, now completely outraged. If you folks at the city hall don't even know what penguins are, I guess you haven't any rules saying they have to be licensed. I will do without a license for Captain Cook. Just a minute, Mr. Powell. Our own Mr. Treadbottom of the Bureau of Navigation of Lakes, Rivers, Ponds, and Streams has just come in. I will let you speak to him personally. Perhaps he knows this Benjamin Cook of yours. In a moment, a new voice was speaking to Mr. Popper. Good morning. This is the Automobile License Bureau. Did you have the same car last year? And if so, what was the license number? Mr. Popper had been switched over to the county building. He decided to hang up. And we'll stop there. So, some of the troubles they have is people getting used to the fact that there's a penguin. Remember, they live in a place almost like South Dakota where you wouldn't have somebody having a pet penguin. I've had some pretty crazy class pets. We've talked about them, but I've never had a penguin. I don't know that you could necessarily keep a penguin in a classroom or at your house for that matter. And Mr. Popper is already starting to realize some of the difficulties of it with people being a little bit frightened by it and not really understanding what he's trying to do to keep this pet. So those are some of the troubles he's having here. Chapter 7 is called Captain Cook Builds a Nest. Now remember we talked about last time that when they put him in the freezer, Mr. Popper said they built a rookery out of pebbles and rocks. So we'll see what Captain Cook uses to build his nest next time. Alrighty?